Welcome to the channel, a place where the road never truly ends and neither do the nightmares that live along it. Tonight, we're diving into 5 real terrifying encounters from truck drivers who swore they'd seen things no human should ever witness. Out there on the highways, past midnight, past exhaustion, past the last flicker of civilization, there are shadows that move on their own voices that whisper through empty CB radios, and figures that appear in the middle of desolate stretches of asphalt only to vanish when you're close enough to see their face. If you're driving right now, or settling in for the night, consider this your warning. The road has secrets. And some truckers didn't come back the same after discovering them. Turn down the lights, get comfortable, and let these stories take the wheel. This is true crime narration for sleep. But tonight, sleep might be the last thing you find. Alright, is the little red light on? Yeah. Okay, look, I don't know if you're going to air this on the show. I don't even know if I want you to. You asked for the deep-cut horror, the stuff we don't talk about at the lunch counter at the Flying J, the stuff that makes us sleep with a tire iron under the bunk. So, here it is. My name is Miller. I've been hauling rebar and heavy machinery for 22 years. I'm not jumpy. I don't believe in ghosts. But I'm parking the rig. I'm done. After last Tuesday on Route 50 in Nevada, I'm handing in my keys. Let me set the scene for you. It's the kind of dark you only get in the high desert. No light pollution, no moon. Just the black pressing against the glass so hard you feel like the cab is a submarine at the bottom of the ocean. I was pulling a flatbed with steel coils heading west. Heavy load. You feel that weight in your hips every time you take a curve. It started with the drag. About 2000 a.m., the truck started feeling sluggish. I checked my gauges. Air pressure was fine. Oil temp was steady. Turbo was spooling correctly. But it felt like I was pulling against a headwind, except the sagebrush on the side of the road wasn't moving. The air was dead still. Then came the sound. It wasn't a mechanical grinding, it was softer. Have you ever heard a heavy canvas tarp flapping in the wind? It sounded like that, but wet. A wet, heavy slapping sound coming from right behind my head, from the space between the tractor and the trailer. We call that the gap. It's a dead space, usually just full of airlines and the pogo stick holding them up. I checked my driver's side mirror. Nothing, just the red marker lights of the trailer. I checked the passenger side. Nothing. But the drag got worse. My RPMs were climbing, but my speed was dropping. I was burning diesel like I was climbing the Rockies, but the road was flat as a pool table. I decided to pull over. Now, on Route 50, you don't just stop on the shoulder if you can help it, but I had to check the load. I found a wide patch of gravel near an old mile marker, hit the hazards, and hissed to a stop. I didn't grab my flashlight immediately. I just sat there for a second, listening. The engine was idling, that rhythmic chug-chug-chug of a Detroit diesel, and underneath that, I heard breathing. And I don't mean the wheeze of an air compressor, I mean lungs, massive fluid-filled lungs. It was slow, rasping, and it was coming from behind the sleeper berth, right outside the thin metal wall against my back. I grabbed my mag light, the big 4-cell metal one that doubles as a club, and I stepped out. The cold desert air hit me, smelling like dust and ozone. I walked to the back of the cab, my boots crunching on the gravel. I shined the light into the gap. At first, my brain couldn't process it. You know how when you see something impossible, your mind tries to make it into something normal? For a second I thought, oh, a tarp fell off and got tangled in the airlines. It wasn't a tarp. Wedged between the back of my cab and the front of the steel coils was a person. But not a person. It was huge. It had limbs that were far too long, with extra joints that folded backward like a grasshopper. It was pale, grayish white like raw chicken skin, and it was completely hairless. It had wrapped itself around the red and blue airlines, tangling its limbs through the cabling to hold on. It was facing the trailer, its back to me. I saw its spine pressing against the skin-knotted sharp vertebrae that looked like a row of knuckles. I stood there, frozen. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't yell. The thing was massive. If it unfurled, it would have been 9 feet tall. Then, slowly, it rotated its head. It didn't turn its body, just the neck. It twisted around a full 180 degrees until it was looking directly at me. It didn't have a face. It had a smooth, indented surface where a face should be, like a thumbprint in wet clay. No eyes, no nose, just a small vertical slit for a mouth. And the smell hit me then. It smelled like old copper and spoiled milk. I stumbled back, raising the heavy flashlight like a weapon. "Get off!" I shouted, my voice cracked, sounding pathetic in the open desert. "Get the hell off my truck!" The thing shifted. It uncoiled one of those long, multi-jointed arms. The hand had 3 fingers, thick and padded, and it reached out and touched the back of my cab, right where the sleeper window is. It stroked the metal gently, almost affectionately. Then the slit on its face opened. It didn't scream. It didn't roar. It mimicked. It played back the sound of my own turn signal. Click-clack, click-clack. Perfect audio fidelity. Then it played the sound of my air brakes hissing. Shh. Then it spoke in my voice. Not similar to my voice. It was my voice. It was a recording of a phone call I'd made to my ex-wife 3 years ago, a call I made from inside that very cab. "I'm sorry, Karen," the thing said, the words coming out of that wet vertical slit. I'm so tired, I can't come home yet." My blood turned to ice. It had been listening. It had been riding in the gap for miles, maybe years, absorbing the sounds of my life through the metal of the cab. I didn't think. I panicked. I swung the mag light with everything I had, aiming for that pale head. The thing moved with impossible speed. It didn't dodge, it just caught the flashlight. One of those 3-fingered hands snatched the metal baton out of the air. It didn't even flinch. It gripped the flashlight, and I watched the aluminum tube crimp and buckle under the pressure of its fingers. It pulled the light from my hand and tossed it into the darkness of the desert. Then it leaned forward, the gray skin of its chest pressing against the airlines, straining them. The face, that awful, blank face, came within inches of mine. I could feel the heat radiating off it. It was fever hot. "Ride," it whispered, but this time it wasn't my voice. It was the voice of a dispatch operator I hadn't spoken to since 1998. Long haul, heavy load. It wasn't attacking me. It was negotiating. It wanted to stay. It was a parasite of momentum. It needed the motion. I backed away, scrambling toward the driver's door. I fully expected it to grab me, to snap me in half like it did the flashlight. But it didn't move. It just watched me with no eyes, its long limbs woven into the mechanics of my truck. I threw myself into the cab and slammed the lock down. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely get the truck in gear. I released the parking brake and floored it. The tires spun in the gravel, throwing rocks, and the rig lurched back onto the highway. I drove faster than I ever have in my life. The speedometer hit 85, then 90. The truck was shaking, vibrating apart. I watched the mirrors. For the first 50 miles, nothing, just the dark. Then, around 4:30 a.m., I saw it. In the passenger side convex mirror, a pale gray hand reached around from the gap and gripped the handle of the passenger door. It was trying to get inside. I started swerving. I yanked the wheel left and right, trying to shake it off, swinging the 80,000-pound trailer like a whip. The hand held on. I could see the knuckles turning white. It started tapping on the window. Tap, tap, tap. Then it started mimicking again. It played the sound of a baby crying. My daughter, when she was an infant, a sound that had happened inside this truck 15 years ago. It cycled through the sounds of my life. My laughter, my coughing, the radio songs I hummed along to. It was playing back my entire existence to me, begging to be let in. I was screaming at it to stop. I grabbed the CB microphone just to hold on to something, to call for help, but the radio was dead. The only sound coming out of the speaker was that wet, slapping sound of the thing's skin against the glass. I saw the sunrise coming up over the salt flats, the first gray light of dawn. As the light hit the truck, the tapping stopped. The hand slowly withdrew from the door handle, sliding back into the shadows of the gap. The drag on the engine lessened. The weight lifted. I didn't stop until I hit a truck stop in Salt Lake City, one with a lot of people and bright lights. I jumped out of the cab with a tire iron in my hand. I ran to the back of the truck, ready to kill whatever was there. The gap was empty. The airlines were stretched and frayed, the plastic coating stripped away in places. There was a greasy gray residue smeared all over the back of the sleeper berth, like slug slime mixed with engine oil. But the thing was gone. I thought it was over. I really did. I quit that company the next day. I left the truck there, keys on the seat. I took a bus home. But here's the thing, and this is why I'm recording this. I'm in my house now. I'm in the suburbs. Haven't been in a truck for a week. But last night I was lying in bed, in the quiet, trying to sleep, and I heard it. It wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from the crawl space in the attic right above my head. I heard the sound of my own turn signal. Click, clack, click, clack. And then a whisper in my own voice filtering down through the drywall ceiling. NT, heavy load, Bach. Good iron. Dock time. I didn't leave it on the highway, I think. Dow Chime brought it home. You're still recording, right? Good. I need this documented. I need to know. I'm not crazy, even if I sound like I'm about to check into a rubber room. Okay, last time I was telling you about the sound. The click-clack of the turn signal coming from my attic. That was Tuesday night. It's Thursday morning now, and I haven't slept more than 40 minutes. It's not just the sounds anymore. It's the silence. The first thing I did was call Karen, my ex-wife. Not about the thing, just about the house. I had her check the perimeter before she left this morning, claiming I was worried about squirrels. She found nothing. No footprints in the soft soil under the eave, no sign of forced entry, no busted vents. The house is buttoned up tight. But the sounds have evolved. Yesterday, the attic was quiet for about 6 hours. Profoundly quiet. Then, around noon, I heard a thumping. Not aggressive thumping, but like something heavy was shifting. Like someone was rolling a 55-gallon drum across the plywood floor up there. I went and got the ladder from the garage. I didn't grab the tire iron this time. I grabbed a shotgun. An old hunting rifle. It made me feel stupid and rational at the same time. The attic entrance is a fold-down stair hidden in the master bedroom closet. I pulled the cord, the stairs clattered down, and a plume of ancient dry dust fell onto the carpet. I stood at the bottom for a long time. The attic is usually hot, smelling of insulation and stored memories, but the smell coming down the stairs. It was that metallic, spoiled milk scent, the smell of the Gap Rider. I put one foot on the first wooden step. It creaked. Immediately, the sound from above changed. The heavy thumping stopped, and the mimicry began. This time, it wasn't my voice or a mechanical sound. It was the voice of my neighbor's dog, a big golden retriever named Gus. Gus died last year. The dog was a fixture in the neighborhood, and the thing started whining. It was the most heart-wrenching, mournful dog whine you've ever heard. It sounded trapped, in pain, right above the stairs. It was trying to lure me up, trying to use the sound of something I would recognize, something I would want to help. I tightened my grip on the shotgun. "I know what you are," I whispered up the dark opening. "You stop that." The whine cut off instantly. Total silence again. I climbed the steps one at a time. The air got thicker and warmer as I went up. When I reached the top platform, I raised the shotgun and aimed the barrel into the gloom. I switched on the lamp I had brought up, hanging it on a rafter. The attic was just insulation, rafters, and cardboard boxes. It was impossible. The space was maybe 20 feet by 30. No place to hide a creature that big. I scanned every corner. Nothing. But the floor was covered in dust, and in that dust there were drag marks. Not footprints. The drag marks looked like someone had pulled a sack of potatoes across the entire length of the attic. Long, shallow troughs in the fiberglass insulation. They led across the floor, past boxes of old Christmas decorations, and ended abruptly at the far wall. I followed the trail slowly, kicking aside a box of my daughter's baby clothes. When I reached the far end, I found the source of the heat. The sheetrock of the exterior wall was hot to the touch. It was pulsing with that fever warmth I felt on the side of my truck, and the insulation around the wall was packed, compressed, and slightly damp with that gray residue. I realized what it was doing. When it rides the rig, it molds itself into the available space. The gap. It shrinks and folds itself to fit. Now that it was in my house, it was finding the narrowest, darkest crevice it could. I leaned closer to the hot sheetrock, and I heard it again, but this time it wasn't a speaker. It was vibrating the material of the wall itself. Ex-wife's voice clear as a bell. My ex-wife's voice clear as a bell. Then, instantly, the high, clear giggle of my daughter at age 5. It was cycling through the sounds, but not randomly. It was hitting my memory points. The audio scrapbook of my life, extracted from the metal and the air of my old truck cab. I pressed my ear against the wall, and I heard a sucking sound, followed by a wet squish. It wasn't just hiding in the wall, it was in the wall. It was breaking down the sheetrock and the wood, folding its grotesque body into the 2x4 cavity, compressing itself into the space meant for wires and pipes. It was fusing with the house, just like it fused with the truck. I brought the shotgun up to the wall, right where the sound was coming from. I was ready to pull the trigger. Then the sound changed. It played a recording of my mother's voice. She passed away 10 years ago. It was her singing a lullaby she used to sing to me when I was a kid. It was perfect. The slight rasp in her throat, the way she missed the high notes. I lowered the gun. My hands were shaking again, but not from fear this time. It was a visceral, crippling wave of grief and memory. "How dare you," I choked out. The song faded. And then, from deep within the wall cavity, the most terrifying sound yet. It wasn't a recording. It was a question. It was whispered, slurred, synthesized from all the voices it had consumed, yet somehow entirely new and original. "Are you lonely now?" That's when I broke. I dropped the gun and scrambled back down the steps, pulling the attic door shut with a slam. I barricaded the closet with the heavy dresser. I'm sitting here now, in the living room. I haven't turned on the lights. It's early morning. I think I understand it now. It doesn't want my body, it wants my inertia. The truck was a vehicle that took a person's entire life, his memories, his loneliness, his 20-year grind, and carried it across the country. This thing feeds on that captured life. The truck was the delivery system, and I was the cargo. It got its claws into the electrical wiring of my house last night. The ceiling fan in the kitchen has been running backwards since midnight, and the refrigerator is humming a tune I haven't heard since high school. It's colonizing my life, piece by piece, sound by sound. I need to leave the house. I know I do, but where do I go? The road's carried it to me, and if I leave, I'm just giving it a new load, a new ride. It's riding me now. I can feel the weight of it, the drag, just like I felt it on the highway. I have to go back up there. I can't let it settle in. I have to drive it out or destroy it. I just don't know how to fight a memory. I stayed downstairs all day yesterday. I didn't eat. I didn't drink. I just listened. The house was humming with borrowed sounds. The screech of a rusty air brake. The distant sound of a ferry horn from a trip I took 20 years ago. It was making a symphony of my forgotten moments. By dusk, I knew I had to go back up. If I let it hibernate in the wall, it would become part of the structure. I wouldn't be fighting a thing. I'd be fighting the house itself. I checked the shotgun. Loaded heavy. I grabbed a can of high-expansion foam insulation, the kind that cures solid as rock, and my biggest hunting knife. I figured if I couldn't shoot it, maybe I could seal it in. The dresser was still wedged against the closet door. I dragged it away, the sound echoing in the silent house. I pulled down the attic stairs. This time, there was no mimicry, no dog whimpering, no lullaby, just a low, constant thrum coming from above like a powerful, muted transformer. I climbed the ladder. I didn't bother with the lamp. I clipped a headlamp on my forehead and stepped onto the plywood. The smell was overwhelming now. It was like sticking your head inside a rotting battery. I aimed the shotgun forward, the light beam cutting through the gloom. The drag marks in the dust were deeper. It had been moving around, and near the center of the attic, near the main support beam, it had started stacking things. It had piled up every meaningful item from my daughter's forgotten boxes, her first pair of ballet slippers, a crayon drawing of our old truck, a deflated basketball. It was a macabre little nest, an altar built of my emotional debris. But what was truly sickening was the sheer amount of the creature's residue. The fiberglass insulation was no longer white. It was saturated with that gray, greasy slime. It looked like the attic was sweating. I moved toward the far wall where I'd heard it yesterday. The wall was still radiating heat. The pulsing had become faster, more irregular. Thump, 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 thump. I raised the gun to the sheetrock. "Get out," I yelled, my voice shaking. "I'm burning this place down if you don't leave." The wall didn't answer with a sound. It answered with a vision. A small section of the drywall, about the size of a dinner plate, became translucent. It didn't break, it just dissolved like cellophane melting. Through the hole, I could see inside the wall cavity. It was impossibly full. The gap rider was compressed into the 4-inch space, its pale gray body folded and interlocked like a massive organic puzzle. Its multi-jointed limbs were wrapped around the wooden studs, slowly crushing them. Its skin was glistening, and its spine, those sharp bony knuckles, was pressing out against the other side of the sheetrock, creating small, circular stress fractures. And then I saw what it was doing. It wasn't just hiding, it was digesting the house. Small fragments of wire insulation, bits of pulverized drywall, and splinters of wood were floating in the gray residue, slowly being absorbed by the creature's tissues. As I watched, the featureless head, still facing the inside of the wall cavity, began to move. Slowly, one of its massive, padded hands stretched out. It wasn't reaching for me. It was reaching for the electrical conduit running vertically down the wall. It touched the plastic sheath of the wire, and the current jumped. A bright, silent blue spark flared around the creature's hand as it began to absorb the electricity. The pulsing intensified. The thrumming in the attic became a painful, resonant drone. And then I heard the final, terrible sound. It was the sound of a truck horn, my truck horn. But it wasn't blaring. It was trapped, compressed, muffled. The noise came from inside the creature, struggling to get out. It was the spirit of my truck, the thing that carried me for 20 years, being consumed. That broke me free of the paralysis. I didn't think about my mother's lullaby or my daughter's giggle. I thought about the smell of diesel and the feeling of the road stretching out forever. That was my life. And this thing was eating it. I dropped the shotgun, knowing the blast would likely go right through the thin wall and into my neighbor's bedroom. I didn't want to bring anyone else into this. I grabbed the high-expansion foam. I raised the nozzle and jammed the tip through the soft, dissolving patch of drywall. The plastic tip broke through the sheetrock and plunged right into the creature's gray flesh. I pressed the trigger. The foam started surging out, filling the cavity with thick, sticky insulation. The creature reacted instantly. It convulsed, the skin around the injection point bubbling and contracting. The noise it made was not a roar or a cry. It was a rapid, garbled cascade of all the sounds it had ever captured, 1,000 turn signals, 50-year-old radio jingles, the laughter of children, the squeak of old boots on metal floorboards. It was the sound of an entire life being scrambled and destroyed. The sheetrock cracked further. The hand gripping the conduit jerked back, slamming against a wooden stud with a sound like a rifle shot. I emptied the entire can, flooding the wall cavity with solidifying foam. When the can was empty, I staggered back. The pulsing stopped. The awful copper smell began to dissipate, replaced by the sharp chemical odor of the foam. The wall was silent. I waited 5 minutes, then 10. Nothing. No sound, no heat. I walked back over, my heart beating a slow, heavy rhythm. I shone the headlamp on the patch of wall. The translucent section had turned opaque again, covered in the gray residue and white foam. It was sealed, entombed. I climbed back down the ladder, my knees weak, and sealed the attic door shut. I left the shotgun and the knife upstairs. I knew I couldn't live in the house anymore, not with that thing locked in the walls, but I also knew I couldn't move it. I called Karen that night. I told her I was selling the house, that I was leaving everything behind. I didn't tell her why. I'm speaking to you from a cheap motel room 50 miles away. I'm starting a new life. No trucks. No long hauls. I'm going to work in a local warehouse, moving goods by hand. Simple. But here's my final thought, the real horror of it. I keep looking at my hands. They were the hands that gripped the wheel, that signed the manifest, that kept the momentum going. And I realized the thing didn't just want the truck, and it didn't just want the house. It wanted the life, the motion, the constant, tired push forward. Last night, I woke up in this quiet motel room, and I felt it, the drag. Not on my back or in the air, but inside my chest. And I realized that when I drove the foam into the wall, the creature didn't fully die. It just shed the host. I think a part of it, a small, vital, parasitic organ of momentum, is still riding. Riding the motion of my blood, riding the tired beat of my heart. It's a permanent passenger, and it will be with me until my final stop. I can't go to sleep, because every time I close my eyes, I hear a faint, distant, internal sound. It's the gentle click-clack of a turn signal deep inside my own ribs, telling me to keep moving. You know, people always ask me why I don't drive nights anymore, why I took a pay cut to only run daytime routes, why I sold my rig, and now I'm just driving local delivery in a box truck, home every night by 6. They think I'm getting soft in my old age, that maybe the road finally wore me down after 23 years. I let them think that. It's easier than telling them the truth. My name is Marcus Webb, and I used to be a long-haul trucker. Cross-country runs were my specialty. I'd take loads from Seattle to Miami, Los Angeles to Boston, wherever the freight needed to go. I loved the solitude, loved the endless ribbon of asphalt stretching out before me. Loved the way the whole country opened up when you were riding in an 18-wheeler at 3 in the morning with nothing but the stars and the highway lines for company. I was good at it too. 23 years without a single accident, not one citation. I knew every truck stop from here to Kingdom Come, knew which rest areas were safe and which ones you avoided after dark, knew the back roads and alternate routes better than the GPS ever could. But that all ended on a run I took last November. The run that made me realize that some roads shouldn't be traveled, that some things out there in the dark spaces between cities aren't meant to be seen by human eyes. This is what happened to me on Route 50 in Nevada. This is why I don't drive nights anymore. It started as a routine job. I was hauling electronics, computer parts mostly, from a warehouse in Sacramento to a distribution center in Kansas City. The load was secure, the truck was running smooth, and I had 5 days to make the delivery with plenty of cushion time. Easy money. I rolled out of Sacramento just after noon on a Tuesday in early November. The weather was perfect clear skies, temperatures in the 60s, light traffic. I made good time to the Sierra Nevada foothills and across the state line into Nevada by early evening. Now, if you've never driven through Nevada, you need to understand something about that state. Sure, everybody knows about Las Vegas and Reno, the bright lights and the casinos, but that's just a tiny fraction of Nevada. The rest of it, it's nothing. Miles and miles and miles of absolute nothing. Desert, mountains, more desert, towns so small they barely register as a wide spot in the road. And darkness, the kind of profound, complete darkness you only get in places where there's no civilization for 100 miles in any direction. Most truckers stick to I-80 across the northern part of the state. It's faster, better maintained, more services. But I had my own preferred route for east-west runs through Nevada, US Route 50, which runs right through the middle of the state. They call it the loneliest road in America, and that's not marketing hype. It's genuinely one of the most isolated stretches of highway in the continental United States. You can drive for an hour without seeing another vehicle. The towns are few and far between, Fallon, Austin, Eureka, Ely, and between them there's just emptiness. But I liked it. The solitude appealed to me, and there's something beautiful about that landscape in its own stark way. The way the desert opens up under a sky so big it makes you feel like an ant. The way the mountains rise up in the distance like sleeping giants. It's the kind of place where you can think, where you can be alone with your thoughts without all the noise and chaos of civilization pressing in on you. I'd driven Route 50 dozens of times over the years. I knew it like the back of my hand. Or so I thought. I fueled up in Fallon around 7 p.m., grabbed a coffee and a sandwich from the truck stop, and headed east. The sun was setting behind me, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Beautiful. I cranked up some classic rock on the radio and settled in for the long haul across the empty middle of Nevada. The first sign that something was off came about an hour east of Fallon. I was rolling through the darkness, my headlights cutting through the night, when I noticed something strange about the mile markers. See, I'd driven this route so many times I had a mental map of it in my head. I knew approximately where everything was, how far between towns, where the good rest areas were, which exit had the decent truck stop. But the mile markers weren't matching up with what I remembered. They seemed wrong somehow. Like they were appearing too quickly, or too slowly. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but something felt off. I shook it off, told myself I was just tired, that my mental map was probably fuzzy after not driving this route for a few months. I turned up the music and kept driving. Around 9 p.m. I saw headlights in my rearview mirror, another vehicle coming up fast behind me. That wasn't unusual. Even on Route 50, you'd occasionally get passed by someone in a hurry. I moved over the right lane to let them by, but the vehicle didn't pass. It just stayed there, maybe 50 yards behind me, matching my speed exactly. I slowed down a bit. The vehicle slowed down. I sped up. The vehicle sped up. I couldn't make out what kind of vehicle it was. The headlights were too bright, just two glaring points of white light in my mirrors. But whoever was driving it seemed content to just follow me, maintaining that same distance. It was annoying, but not particularly alarming. Sometimes you get weird drivers on lonely roads. Maybe they felt safer following a big rig, using me as a pace car or something. I'd seen stranger behavior. After about 20 minutes of this, I decided to pull off at the next rest area and let them pass. There was one coming up in a few miles. I remembered it, a small picnic area with a couple of parking spots and a pit toilet. Nothing fancy, but enough to take a break. I put on my turn signal and started to slow down as I approached the rest area. The vehicle behind me slowed down too. I pulled off the highway into the rest area. The vehicle followed me in. That's when I started to feel the first real prickle of unease. The rest area was completely empty, just a small parking lot with a picnic shelter and a cinder-block bathroom building. One sickly yellow light buzzed over the parking area. I pulled my rig to the far end of the lot and stopped, keeping the engine running. The other vehicle. Now, I could see it was a dark-colored sedan, something generic and nondescript. Pulled in and stopped about 30 feet away from me, its headlights pointed directly at my truck. I sat there for a minute waiting to see what would happen. The sedan just sat there, engine running, headlights on. I couldn't see anyone inside. The headlights were too bright, creating a glare that made it impossible to see past the windshield. My unease was growing into something more substantial now. This wasn't normal behavior. If they'd just been following me for company, they should have driven on when I pulled off. If they needed to stop and rest, they should have parked and gotten out. But they just sat there, watching. I decided I didn't want to stay here. I put the truck in gear and pulled back out onto the highway, accelerating hard. In my mirror, I saw the sedan's headlights swing back onto the road behind me, and the following continued. By 10 p.m., I was genuinely unsettled. The sedan had been behind me for over an hour now, never getting closer, never falling back, just maintaining that constant 50-yard distance. I tried everything I could think of to lose it, speeding up to well over the speed limit, slowing down to a crawl, weaving between lanes. Nothing worked. It matched every move I made with eerie precision. I grabbed my CB radio and tried to raise anyone on the channel. Breaker, breaker, this is Midnight Rider. Anybody out there? Nothing but static. That was odd. Even on lonely roads, you could usually pick up some chatter on the CB, truckers talking to each other across the miles. But tonight, there was nothing. Just empty static, like I was the only person left in the world. I tried my cell phone next, thinking I'd call the Nevada Highway Patrol, report this weirdo following me. But when I looked at my phone, I saw there was no signal. 0 bars. That wasn't entirely unusual out here. Cell coverage in rural Nevada was spotty at best, but the timing felt ominous. I was completely isolated. No radio contact, no cell service, nothing but empty highway stretching out ahead of me and a mysterious sedan following behind. The next town on Route 50 was Austin, a tiny place about halfway across the state, still another hour or so ahead. I decided I'd push through to Austin, pull into the first gas station I saw, hopefully find some people and shake this creepy follower. But as the miles ticked by, I started to notice other things that weren't right. The highway itself looked. I'd driven this stretch dozens of times, and while it was dark and the headlights only illuminated so much, something about the landscape around me felt wrong. The mountains in the distance weren't quite the right shape. The road seemed to curve in places where I didn't remember curves. Even the painted lines on the asphalt looked faded and weathered, like this road hadn't been maintained in years. And there was something else. Something I couldn't quite articulate but could feel in my gut. A wrongness to the air, to the darkness outside my windows. Like the world beyond my headlight beams wasn't quite real, like I was driving to a stage set or a dream. I checked my GPS, hoping it would reassure me that I was still on the right route, still heading in the right direction. But the GPS was acting strangely too. The little icon representing my truck kept jumping around on the map, and the estimated time to destination kept changing, sometimes showing I was hours ahead of schedule, sometimes hours behind. This is crazy, I muttered to myself. Get it together, Marcus, you're just tired, everything's fine. But I didn't believe it. Some primitive part of my brain was screaming at me that everything was not fine, that I needed to turn around, get off this road, get back to civilization. The problem was, I didn't know if I could. The sedan was still behind me, and something told me that if I tried to turn around, it wouldn't let me, so I kept driving. What else could I do? At 11:05 p.m., I should have been getting close to Austin. But when I looked at my odometer, I realized I'd already driven well past where Austin should have been. Somehow, I'd missed it entirely. But how? Austin sat right on Route 50. You couldn't miss it unless you were blind. Unless I wasn't on Route 50 anymore. That thought sent a chill down my spine. But it was impossible, wasn't it? I hadn't turned off anywhere. I'd been driving straight east this whole time. There was nowhere else I could be. And yet, I slowed down, scanning the roadside for any kind of sign or landmark that might tell me where I was. But there was nothing. Just empty desert stretching out into darkness on both sides, and the road unwinding endlessly before me. Behind me, the sedan slowed to match my pace. That's when I saw it. Off to the right side of the road, maybe 100 yards ahead. A figure. Someone was standing on the shoulder of the highway. My first reaction was relief. Another person, maybe someone who'd broken down, needed help. At least I wasn't alone out here. As I got closer, my headlights illuminated the figure more clearly. It was a woman. I could see that much. She was wearing what looked like a white dress or nightgown, and she was just standing there, perfectly still, facing the road. I started to slow down, my hand moving toward the air brake. But something stopped me. Something about the way she was standing, so impossibly still. The way the white dress didn't move at all in the night breeze. The way she didn't wave or signal for help, just stood there, watching. As I drew even with her, my headlights swept across her face. I only got a glimpse, maybe half a second, but it was enough to make my blood run cold. Her face was wrong. The features were there, eyes, nose, mouth, but they were arranged in a way that wasn't quite human. The proportions were off, the angles all wrong, like someone had tried to make a human face from memory but didn't quite get it right. And her eyes. God, her eyes, they were completely black. No whites, no iris, just solid black orbs that reflected my headlights like an animal's eyes in the dark. I stomped on the accelerator, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. The truck surged forward, and a figure disappeared behind me. I glanced in my side mirror, and what I saw made my stomach lurch. The woman was still there, still standing in the same spot, but now she was turned around, facing my direction, watching me drive away. And even though I was already hundreds of yards past her, and pulling away fast, I could still see those black eyes clearly in my mirror, as if distance meant nothing, as if she was looking directly into me. Then she was gone, swallowed by the darkness. But the sedan was still there, still following, still maintaining that exact distance. I don't know how long I drove after that. Time seemed to have lost all meaning. My dashboard clock said 11,030, then 12,000, then suddenly 10,045, then 1,015. It kept jumping around randomly, and I stopped trusting it. The landscape outside my windows had become even more surreal. The mountains in the distance seemed to move, sliding around the horizon like puzzle pieces being rearranged. Sometimes I'd see lights in the distance, like a town, and I'd drive toward them with desperate hope, only to have them vanish as I got closer. And there were more figures. Every few miles I'd see another one standing on the roadside. Men, women, children, or at least things that looked like them from a distance. All of them wearing outdated clothing, all of them standing perfectly still, all of them watching with those wrong faces and those terrible black eyes. I stopped even thinking about pulling over. I just drove, foot heavy on the accelerator, pushing the truck as fast as it would go, desperately trying to find some way out of this nightmare. The sedan never fell back. No matter how fast I went, 70, 80, 90 miles per hour, it stayed right there 50 yards behind, its headlights burning in my mirrors. Around what my unreliable clock said was 2 a.m., I saw something ahead that made my heart leap. Lights. Real lights, lots of them. A town. I nearly wept with relief. Finally, I was getting out of this. I'd pull into that town, find a police station, tell them what? That I'd been followed by a car and seen some weird people on the roadside? That the road felt wrong? They'd think I was crazy or drunk. But I didn't care. I just wanted to be around other people, wanted to see normal faces, wanted to know I was back in the real world. As I got closer, I could see the town more clearly. It was small, just a cluster of buildings along the highway. There was a gas station with lights on, a diner, what looked like a small motel. A few streetlights illuminated the main drag. But something was off about it. The lights had a strange quality to them, flickering and wavering like candle flames. And the buildings themselves looked faded somehow, like old photographs that had been left in the sun too long. I took the exit into town, the sedan following me off the highway. The main street was completely deserted. Not a single car parked on the curbs, no people walking around, nothing. The diner's neon sign buzzed and flickered, ROZIETS, open 24 hours. But when I looked through the windows as I drove past, I could see that the interior was dark and empty. I pulled into the gas station parking lot. The lights were on, but when I looked at the building, I could see that the windows were boarded up. The gas pumps looked ancient, the kind I hadn't seen in decades. The sedan pulled in behind me and stopped, its headlights still on, still pointed at my truck. I sat there, engine idling, trying to figure out what to do. Should I get out? Try to find help? Or should I just keep driving, hope that somehow I'd eventually find my way back to the real Route 50? The decision was made for me when I looked in my side mirror and saw the sedan's door open. Someone was getting out. It was a man. Tall, wearing what looked like an old suit, the kind businessmen wore in the 1950s. He stood beside the sedan for a moment, then started walking toward my truck. There was something wrong with the way he moved. The motion was too smooth, too fluid, like he was gliding rather than walking. And as he got closer, and my headlights illuminated him better, I could see that his face had that same wrong quality as the woman I'd seen earlier. Features arranged in an almost, but not quite right configuration. He stopped about 10 feet from my driver's side door and looked up at me. When he spoke, his voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, like it was inside my head rather than coming from his mouth. "You shouldn't be here," he said. I couldn't respond. My throat had locked up with fear. "This road isn't for you," the thing wearing a man's shape continued. "You took a wrong turn. You're in between now, in the space between where you were and where you're going." "What? What are you?" I finally managed to croak out. The thing tilted its head at an unnatural angle, like a bird examining an insect. "We're the ones who live in the between places, the empty spaces, the forgotten roads. Usually you humans stay on your routes, your safe and charted paths. But sometimes someone wanders off, gets lost, ends up here." "How do I get back?" I asked, my voice shaking. You have to remember, it said. Remember the real road. Remember where you were supposed to be. The way back is through memory. It turned and glided back to the sedan. The door closed and the car's engine revved once, a sound like grinding metal and breaking glass. But be quick, the thing's voice echoed in my head. Stay here too long, and you'll fade. Become like us. Become part of the between. The sedan backed up, turned around, and drove off down the street, its taillights disappearing into the strange, flickering darkness. I sat there in that impossible ghost town, my mind reeling. Remember the real road. Remember where I was supposed to be. What did that even mean? I closed my eyes and tried to think, tried to visualize Route 50 as I knew it. The real Route 50, not this nightmare version. I thought about the landmarks I knew, the mile markers, the towns, Fallon, where I'd filled up, then Austin, which I should have reached hours ago, then Eureka, then Ely, then across the Utah border. I focused on Austin. Small town, old mining settlement, sat in a valley with mountains on both sides. There was a gas station on the east end of town, and a little cafe that made good pie. I'd stopped there dozens of times over the years. I kept my eyes closed and held that memory in my mind as clearly as I could. The real Austin, Nevada, on the real Route 50. Then I opened my eyes, put the truck in gear, and started driving again. The ghost town began to fade almost immediately. The buildings became transparent, then disappeared entirely. The flickering lights went out one by one. Within moments, I was back on an empty highway, cutting through darkness. But this darkness felt different. Less oppressive, more natural. I kept driving, holding my mental image of the real Route 50 in my mind like a lifeline. And slowly, gradually, things started to feel right again. The highway began to look familiar. The mountains took on recognizable shapes. The road curved in places I remembered. And then, around 3 a.m., according to my clock, which now seemed to be working normally, I saw lights ahead. Real lights, steady and bright. Austin, Nevada. I've never been so happy to see a town in my entire life. I pulled into the gas station on the east end of Austin and parked. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn off the engine. I sat there for a long moment, just breathing, trying to process what had just happened. Had it been real? Had I really driven through some kind of parallel road, some between space inhabited by strange entities? Or had I just fallen asleep at the wheel, had some kind of vivid nightmare while my truck cruised on autopilot? I didn't know. Still don't know, to be honest. But I do know this. When I checked my GPS and odometer, they showed that I'd driven over 300 miles since leaving Fallon. But according to the map, Austin was only about 100 miles east of Fallon. I'd lost 200 miles somewhere, or driven them on a road that doesn't exist. I went inside the gas station, a normal, brightly lit convenience store with a bored-looking clerk behind the counter, and bought a coffee and some snacks. Everything looked blessedly ordinary and real. The clerk noticed me staring around like I'd never seen a gas station before. "You okay, buddy?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. Just to see people." He laughed. I hear that. Route 50 can get pretty lonely at night. You're the first customer I've had in hours. I paid for my stuff and went back to my truck. I sat in the cab and called my dispatcher, told him I was going to rest for a few hours before continuing on. He was fine with that. I was still well ahead of schedule. I tried to sleep in the cab, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw those figures standing on the roadside, their wrong faces and black eyes staring at me. Finally, around dawn, I gave up on sleep and started driving again, east, toward Kansas City, back to the world of interstates and traffic and civilization. I finished that run, delivered my load, and headed home to Sacramento. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed, that I'd seen something I wasn't supposed to see, been somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. Over the next few weeks, I tried to convince myself it had all been a hallucination. Stress, fatigue, maybe some bad coffee at that truck stop in Fallon. The mind plays tricks when you're tired and driving through empty darkness. But then I started noticing things. Little things at first. Shadows that moved wrong, headlights in my rearview mirror that seemed to follow me for just a bit too long, the feeling of being watched when I was parked at rest stops, and the dreams. God, the dreams. Every night, I dream I was back on that impossible stretch of road, driving through darkness while those figures watched from the roadside. And in the dreams, I could see more of them than I had that night. Dozens of them, hundreds, all standing silent and still, all watching with those black eyes. Sometimes, in the dreams, I'd see my own face among them. I started having panic attacks when I'd drive at night. My heart would race, my hands would shake, I'd break out in a cold sweat. I'd see those headlights in my mirror and become convinced it was the sedan again, following me, pulling me back toward that between place. My doctor thought I was having a breakdown, prescribed me anxiety medication, suggested I take some time off. But medication couldn't touch whatever was wrong with me. The final straw came 3 months later on another night run through Nevada. I was on I-80 this time, nowhere near Route 50. But around 2 a.m., as I was driving through the darkness, I saw something on the side of the highway that made my blood freeze. A figure in white, standing perfectly still, watching. I don't remember pulling over, don't remember stopping. The next thing I knew, I was sitting in my truck on the shoulder of the highway, shaking uncontrollably, unable to breathe. A highway patrol officer found me there at dawn. He thought I'd had a heart attack or something. wanted to call an ambulance. It took me 20 minutes to convince him I was okay, that I just needed to rest. But I wasn't okay, and I knew I'd never be okay with long-haul driving again. So I sold my rig, took a job doing local deliveries, short routes, always home by dinner time, never driving at night, never driving through empty places. My friends and family think I burned out, that the road finally got to me after 23 years. They don't understand why I won't go on road trips anymore, why I get nervous if I have to drive after dark, why I avoid lonely highways. I let them think what they want. It's easier than explaining. But sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I think about that road, that impossible stretch of highway that exists somewhere in the between places. I think about those entities that live there feeding on lost travelers, on people who wander off the safe and charted paths. And I wonder, how many other roads like that are out there? How many other drivers have taken a wrong turn and found themselves in places that shouldn't exist? How many of them found their way back? How many didn't? There's one more thing I should mention, something I discovered about a month ago that's been eating at me ever since. I was going through some old maps, trying to trace my route that night, trying to figure out exactly where I'd gone wrong, and I found something disturbing. There used to be a town called Rosie's Junction on Route 50, about halfway between Fallon and Austin. It was founded in the 1940s as a rest stop for travelers, built around a gas station and a diner called, you guessed it, Rosie's Eats. But Rosie's Junction was abandoned in the 1970s. The old highway was rerouted a few miles to the south, and the town was left to die. By the 1980s, it was a ghost town. The buildings were falling apart, slowly being reclaimed by the desert. I found an old photograph of Rosie's Junction from the 1960s. The diner, the gas station, the little motel. All exactly as I'd seen them that night. Except the real Rosie's Junction doesn't exist anymore. Hasn't existed for decades. The buildings were torn down in the late 1990s. There's nothing there now but empty desert. So what did I see that night? A memory? A ghost? Some kind of imprint left on the fabric of reality by a place that used to exist? I don't know. And honestly, I don't want to know. All I know is this: there are roads out there that don't go where you think they go. Highways that lead to places that exist in the cracks and shadows of the world. And if you're not careful, if you lose focus, if you forget where you are, if you stop paying attention to the reality around you, you can slip through those cracks. And once you're there, once you're in that between place, you might never find your way back. I still drive. I have to. That's how I make my living. But I'm careful now. So careful. I plan my routes down to the last detail. I never deviate from the plan. I avoid lonely roads, especially at night. I stay on major highways where there's traffic, lights, civilization, and if I ever see headlights following me for too long, if I ever see a figure standing by the roadside in the darkness, I do exactly what that thing in the suit told me to do. I remember. I remember where I am, where I'm supposed to be. I hold on to reality with both hands and don't let go, because I know what's waiting out there in the between places. And I know that if I ever slip back into that darkness, if I ever find myself on that impossible road again, I might not be lucky enough to find my way home a second time. So I drive carefully. I stay alert. I never let my mind wander. And I never, ever take Route 50 through Nevada anymore, not even in daylight. Some roads, once you've seen where they really lead, are best left untraveled. I've been driving trucks for almost half my life now, and I've had my fair share of weird experiences. Strange people at rest stops, animals darting across the highway, weird lights in the sky you can't really explain. But none of that compares to what I saw in the mountains of Colorado one night. I'll tell you this, straight up, I wasn't tired. I wasn't hallucinating. I wasn't hopped up on caffeine or nodding off behind the wheel. I was fully awake, fully aware, and something out there in those mountains knew I was alone. It happened about 5 winters ago. I was hauling a refrigerated trailer full of produce from California to Missouri. The route took me through the Rockies, long stretches of winding mountain roads, tight turns, steep climbs. The kind of drive that demands every ounce of attention you've got. It was around 1 a.m. The sky was pitch black. Snow falling lightly but steady enough that visibility dropped to maybe 20 or 30 feet ahead. But the road itself was mostly empty. Just me and whatever animals were smart enough to stay off the asphalt. I had the radio low, heater buzzing, the hum of the engine keeping me company. The roads up there have a weird silence to them, like the mountains swallowed the sound. You feel cut off from the rest of the world. Then, out of nowhere, I heard a thump, a light one, on the passenger side, followed by a scraping sound. My first thought was snow or ice falling from the trailer. Happens all the time. But this wasn't coming from the trailer, it was coming from the side of the cab. I leaned a little to my right, glanced at the side mirror, couldn't see much, just darkness and swirling snow. Another thump. This one harder, like something hit the door. I slowed down just a bit, not enough to cause a problem on the icy road, just enough to listen. Nothing. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. Something dark. Low to the ground, moving fast along the passenger side. I squinted, leaning closer to the window, and that's when I realized, whatever it wasn't an animal. It was keeping pace with my truck. I was going about 45 miles an hour up an incline. No animal, not a deer, not a mountain lion, not a wolf, none of them can run like that. Not uphill, not in deep snow, not silently. I felt my stomach drop. I eased my foot on the gas, slowing down more, trying to catch a better look. And when I did, I wish I hadn't. This thing, this shape, was running on all fours, but the limbs were all wrong. Long, angular, bent like they were dislocated but still moving with perfect coordination. Its body was lean, almost human in shape, but stretched out, like someone elongated a person by a couple feet. The skin, or whatever covered it, looked grayish, maybe pale, maybe just reflecting my headlights through the snow. But the worst part? It lifted its head as it ran, and I saw its face. It didn't have one, just a smooth surface where features should have been. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. But somehow, I knew it was looking at me. Instinct kicked in. I floored it. Not enough to lose control, but enough to get some distance. The trailer groaned, engine roared, tires gripped the snow, and the speed climbed back up. But that thing, it sped up too. It stayed right alongside me, matching my pace like it was effortless. Its limbs hit the ground in a rhythmic, unnatural pattern, like bone tapping against ice. I yelled, "What the hell are you?" Not expecting an answer. I didn't get an answer, but I did get something. The thing veered suddenly, almost like it leaped, and hit the passenger side door so hard the whole cab shook. The mirror rattled. Something scraped against the metal. I swerved slightly from the impact, heart racing, hands sweating so bad the steering wheel felt slippery. The radio cut out with static, loud, violent, ear-piercing static. Like interference coming from right beside me. I forced myself to look. I shouldn't have. Now, it wasn't running. It was climbing the side of my truck. Its limbs stretched, bending upward, joints popping, gripping the metal like it weighed nothing. It moved like an insect, fast, controlled, deliberate. It pulled itself up until its head was level with the passenger window, right next to me, only inches of glass separating us. I've never felt fear like that in my life. Not once. That blank, featureless face pressed close to the window, not bumping it, not testing it, almost like it was listening. I tried to keep control of the wheel, but I couldn't take my eyes off the window. Then it did something I'll never forget. The skin on its face shifted, like something was moving beneath it, like hands pressing outward under a sheet. A bulge pushed forward in the shape of a mouth, stretching, pulling the skin open until a dark gaping hole formed. No lips, no teeth, just a void. And from that void came a sound, not a voice, not a scream. It was a pitch, a vibrating hum that made the glass tremble, made my chest tighten, made the hairs on my arms stand straight up. I slammed my hand on the horn, desperate, panicked, anything to make it stop. The honk blasted through the mountains, echoing, and the thing reacted. It snapped its head back, the mouth sealing up instantly like it had never been there. Its limbs scrambled, slipping, and then it launched itself off the cab and vanished into the dark on the right side of the road. Just gone. No footsteps, no sound, no shadow, just darkness. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. I drove until sunrise, white-knuckled and shaking, staring at the mirrors every 2 seconds. When I finally stopped at a way station, I forced myself to check the truck. The passenger door had dents, long, finger-shaped ones. The metal was scraped like something with claws or bones had dragged itself across the side. And the mirror? It had a crack. Just one, clean, right down the middle. I never told the officers there. Never told the company. Never told anyone until now. But I'll say this much. Sometimes, when I'm driving through the mountains late at night, I'll catch something moving in the dark beside the road for a split second. And every time, without fail, my heart stops. Because I know damn well. Some things out there can run just as fast as your truck, and some of them want you to notice. My name's Elijah, but out on the road, most folks just call me Eli. I've been hauling refrigerated loads for almost 12 years now. Produce, dairy, meat, you name it. Nothing special. Just miles, diesel fumes, and long nights where the highway becomes your entire world. Now, a lot of truckers out here love their radios. Some guys talk on them all night to stay awake. Not me. I've always liked the silence, the hum of the engine, the occasional song from whatever station I can actually pick up. It gives me peace, keeps my head clear. At least, it used to. What I'm about to tell you happened 2 years ago along a stretch of Route 84 in Oregon, a lonely, quiet road between La Grande and Baker City. Not much out there except pine trees, mountains, and more silence than any one man needs. It was late November, right after Thanksgiving. I remember the cold, sharp, biting cold that made the air feel metallic. I'd been driving since sunset, trying to make up time after a delay at the warehouse. The plan was simple: drive through the night, stop at a rest area around dawn, sleep for a few hours. Easy. Around 1:30 in the morning, snow started falling. Not heavy, just a thin veil of flakes drifting down from a pitch-black sky. The kind of snowfall that swallows sound. That was the first thing I noticed. The world got quiet. Too quiet. Even inside the cab, even with the engine humming under me, there was this strange, heavy stillness pressing in around everything. Like the night had swallowed all the noise. I turned on the radio just to break the silence. Static. Just static. I scanned for another station. More static. I tried every frequency I could, but all I got was that low, hissing noise. I shrugged it off and kept driving. But then something strange happened. The static shifted, not gradually, not fading. It snapped into clarity, just for a moment. It wasn't a station, it was a voice, a whisper, so soft I almost missed it. At first I thought I imagined it, just my tired mind playing tricks. But then, as the snow thickened and the highway dipped into a darker patch between the mountain ridges, the whisper returned. My radio was still tuned to dead static. No station, no signal, but underneath the static was something else. A low, rhythmic sound. Breathing. Not mine, not the engine's. Someone breathing into the frequency. Slow, steady inhales and exhales. My fingers tightened on the wheel. A cold pulse moved through my chest. I reached to shut off the radio. The knob didn't move. I tried again. Harder. Nothing. The radio was on full power, but none of the controls worked. I pressed the power button so many times my thumb started to ache. The radio didn't respond. The breathing grew louder. And then a voice, faint at first, began speaking through the statics. Do you hear me? My mouth went dry. The hairs on my arms lifted. My first thought was that someone nearby was messing with the CB frequency. But this wasn't the CB. This wasn't anything I recognized. The voice crackled again, barely audible beneath the static. Sure, on the wrong road. Eli Ty didn't breathe. I didn't move. No one knew where I was. I hadn't spoken to another driver in hours. And the voice wasn't familiar. It wasn't any trucker I'd ever heard. I reached down for the CB radio, even though I wasn't sure what I'd say. But before I could pick it up, the voice spoke again. Don't touch that. The sound of those words, soft, almost gentle, hit me harder than a scream would have. Because he knew what I was doing. My cab was dark. The snow outside reflected what little light the sky gave. The world felt wrong, tilted, like I'd driven into a place that wasn't meant for me. I tried to turn the volume down, but the knob wouldn't budge. My fingers slipped off it again and again. The radio's glow flickered, then steadied. Another breath, another whisper. You shouldn't be here, Eli. Not tonight. I muttered a curse under my breath, like speaking out loud would make me feel real again, solid again. I checked my mirrors, left, right, then center. Nothing behind me, just tire tracks disappearing into falling snow. But something felt close. Too close. The radio crackled louder. Then the voice changed. It wasn't a whisper anymore. It was clearer. Still distorted, but stronger. Like whatever was speaking was getting closer to the frequency. Juju missed the turn. You missed it, the words looped. Over and over. The same cadence, like someone rocking back and forth, muttering to themselves. I gripped the wheel tighter and my voice came out shaky. What turn? What the hell are you talking about? The radio answered instantly. Do you know which one? I didn't. I absolutely didn't. But something about the way the voice said it made me feel like I should have known. Like I'd forgotten something important. Where are you? I finally asked. The breathing slowed, became shallow. A moment passed. Then, look in the mirror. I didn't want to. Every part of my body screamed not to. But I did. In the side mirror, just barely visible through the reflection of my own headlights on the snow, something moved. Not a person, not an animal. A shape, tall, thin, standing perfectly still on the side of the road, its head lowered, arms hanging unnaturally long. I jerked my attention back to the road, but the voice hissed. Left mirror, Eli. Look again. Against every instinct I had, I glanced back. The figure was closer, not walking, not running, just closer. The radio began to crackle violently, the static surging like a storm. The voice grew distorted, layered, like multiple people speaking at once. Fultline, you missed the turn. Why did you miss it? Why didn't you listen? Why didn't you see? My breathing turned shaky. My chest tightened. I forced myself to keep my eyes on the highway. The snow was falling faster now, heavy, swirling sideways. I could barely see the lines. The voice snapped sharp high at, turn now. There's no road, I shouted. There's nothing here. The static screamed back at me. A sudden burst so loud I flinched. Then it stopped. Soft breathing returned. Slow, calm, almost gentle. Sheer not listening, I'd something slammed against the back of my trailer. Hard. The entire cab jolted. My teeth clacked together. I slammed the brakes, and the truck fishtailed, tires skidding on ice. The trailer swayed dangerously before regaining traction. I checked my mirrors again. The figure was gone. The highway behind me was empty. I put the truck back into gear, ready to move. Anything to get away. But before I could release the brake, the radio whispered, "Don't leave me here." Cold crawled up my spine like a living thing. I didn't answer. I didn't breathe. The voice shifted, lower now, trembling. I tried to warn you. The radio's display flickered, dimmed, then went completely black. No sound, no static, dead. But for a few seconds after the radio went silent, the breathing continued. Not through the speakers. From the passenger seat, slow, deep breaths, like someone was sitting right next to me. I didn't look. I threw the truck into first gear and drove. I don't remember the next 30 minutes. I just remember the moment I saw the lights of a rest stop glowing through the snowfall. When I finally came to a stop, the radio display blinked back to life. Like nothing had ever happened. I turned it off. This time it worked. I got out of the truck on shaking legs and checked the trailer. On the back door, almost hidden under a layer of snow, were 3 long dents, deep, as if something had slammed into the metal with enormous force, but there were no footprints, no tire tracks, nothing, just my own. The snow around the dents wasn't disturbed at all, like whatever hit the trailer never stood on the ground. I stayed in that rest stop from 3 a.m. until sunrise, sitting upright in the driver's seat with the radio unplugged from the dash. I didn't sleep. I didn't even close my eyes for long, and I've never driven that stretch of road alone again. Some nights, when the air is cold and the silence gets too deep, I swear I can hear faint breathing behind the static of the radio, even when it's turned completely off. And sometimes it says my name. I've never really talked about this night publicly. Most drivers would probably laugh or say I was exhausted or blame it on the snow or the hours. And sure, I was tired, but not tired enough to imagine what I saw, not tired enough to hallucinate the things I heard. I've been driving since the early 2000s. I've crossed every major interstate in this country, ran nights, weeks, months out on the road. You get used to weird stuff, weather, animals, the loneliness, the silence. You get used to your mind playing tricks on you. But what happened in northern Nevada back in the winter of 2014, that wasn't my mind. That wasn't a trick. And I'll swear on everything I've got that something was out in that storm with me. Something that wasn't human. Let me take you back to that night. I was hauling a flatbed loaded with construction machinery, cold as hell outside, snow coming down sideways, wind strong enough to push the trailer a few inches every time a gust hit. Dispatch had bumped up my drop-off time by almost 12 hours. They needed ASAP. They always needed ASAP. It was around 10 p.m. when I saw the damn sign, road closed, detour next right. I groaned so loud the cab echoed. GPS didn't say anything about a closure, but Nevada roads in winter have a mind of their own. So I took the detour, this narrow, beat-up service road barely wide enough for a rig. No lights, no reflectors. Just my headlights cutting through the snow. After a couple miles, the snow turned to gravel under the tires, and that's when I saw an old gravel pit off to the right. Huge. Deep. Probably 40, maybe 50 feet down. My headlights swept across it, and for half a second I thought someone was standing down there. But the light moved too fast for me to be sure. Then my CD crackled. Loud. Sharp. Like someone exhaling directly into the speaker. I reached for the knob, thinking maybe I brushed against it or something, but it wasn't static. It almost sounded wet, a breath that wasn't mine. I tried to ignore it, just kept my eyes on the road. But the snow was getting worse, and the wind pushed my trailer sideways hard enough that I started worrying I'd jackknife. Up ahead was this small dirt turnoff. Barely a flattened patch of ground, but it was enough space for me to park and wait out the storm. So I eased the truck onto it, dropped it into neutral, set the brakes, and just sat there listening to the storm battering the cab. But after a moment, I got that feeling. You know it if you've ever driven nights, the feeling like someone standing just outside your window, staring at you. I grabbed my flashlight, leaned toward the passenger side window, and scanned the road. Nothing. But when the beam hit the gravel pit again, that's when I saw it. Something was climbing up the side of the pit. Not walking. Not crawling on all fours. It was using its limbs in this messed up, stretched out motion, like its elbows bent the wrong way, like its joints could twist in directions they weren't supposed to. My lights caught just enough of it to see that it was tall, too tall, like a person's silhouette stretched out of shape. Its arms were long, reaching almost to its knees. And then it stopped, right there halfway up the pit wall, and it turned its head toward me. I couldn't see eyes, or a face. Just this long, narrow shape of a head tilting slowly like it was curious. Every hair on my body stood up. Then the thing started moving toward me. I froze. Just sat there like an idiot, watching it come closer, dragging itself through the snow. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it over the wind. I snapped out of it, turned the key. Engine sputtered. Coughed. Died. And no, don't do this to me now, I muttered. Tried again. Nothing. I don't know if it was the cold or something messing with the truck. But at that moment, I swear I felt like I was trapped in a tin can while something walked straight toward me. And then It reached the side of the truck. I heard scratching, but not like fingernails or claws. It sounded like bone, like someone dragging a handful of loose bones across the metal. The sound moved upward, across my window, up the side of the cab, over the roof. And then the roof dented inward, like something heavy was crawling on top of me. I held my breath, didn't move a muscle, didn't dare look up. Then, bang, something slammed the roof hard enough that the whole truck shook. The CB came alive again, hissing, whispering, breathing. Then a voice, deep, ragged, like someone speaking through water. Let me in. I dropped my crowbar without even realizing I'd grabbed it. My hands were shaking so bad I couldn't feel my fingers. Another slam hit the roof. Metal groaned. The windshield creaked. I don't remember praying out loud, but I must have. I remember whispering, "Please stop, please stop, please stop." Then the door handle next to me clicked, and it started to turn. I lunged and shoved my weight against the door, holding it closed even though the lock should have held on its own. The handle kept rattling. It kept trying, slow, deliberate. Then it stopped. Silence. Pure, dead silence. I sat there for God knows how long, clutching the door, chest tight, ears ringing. Eventually the storm started to settle. The wind died down. The snow eased up. Everything outside grew calm. I forced myself to check the mirrors. The pit was empty. The road was empty. Whatever it was gone. I tried the engine again. This time it fired right up. I floored it out of there and didn't stop until I reached a truck stop, a good 30 miles away. I parked under the brightest lights I could find. Felt safer with other rigs around, but when I climbed out and looked at the cab, the roof had a deep dent, not a branch, not ice. It looked like something with weight had crawled across it, and the passenger side door, there were marks carved into the metal, deep grooves, wide, curved, like something had pried at it with fingers, except the grooves looked like there were more than 5. I never took that detour again. Hell, I never stopped near a gravel pit again. And even now, 10 years later, when snow starts coming down sideways and the wind howls just right, I still hear that voice in the back of my mind. And that wraps up tonight's journey down the darkest highways in North America. 5 encounters, 5 reminders that the road holds far more than traffic and taillights. For some truckers, the night never truly ends, and the things they saw out there still follow them in their mirrors. If you made it this far, thank you for riding with me through the shadows. Your support keeps this channel rolling, and it means more than you know. If you enjoyed these stories, or if they kept you looking over your shoulder, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss another night drive into the unknown. Share this video with someone who loves horror, or someone who needs a reason not to drive alone at 3 a.m. This is True Crime Narration for Sleep, signing off for now. Stay safe out there, and remember, on the open road, it's not always the living you need to watch out for. Good night.